Hi, this is Gejo, and in this lesson we will look at tone of a reading comprehension passage. Now there are questions which specifically ask you to identify the tone of a passage. I'm not dealing with those kind of questions. We're looking at a very different perspective on tone. That is, can I use the tone to understand the passage better? Can I use the tone to evaluate the options better? Now we can do that. Let's see how. Before you start this video, I will recommend that you watch the video on effective reading and wrong options. I will leave the link in the description below. Now let's get started. Here is a question. According to the passage, Gabriel's songs, option 1, were criticized for not being spiritual or tender. Option 2 were neither spiritual nor tender. Now how are these two options different? Both the options talks about Gabriel's song not being spiritual or tender. You might say that these two options are very close, but in fact they are not. What is different between these two options? What makes these two options very different? If you look at the question, it talks about according to the passage. That means according to the author who wrote that particular passage. So we are looking at what is author's perspective on Gabriel's songs. Now let's look at the second option, which said were neither spiritual nor tender. Now that is a direct opinion that the author has. Author believes that the Gabriel song is not spiritual nor tender, though there is a direct criticism the author has towards Gabriel's song. But you look at the other answer choice, which says were criticized for not being spiritual or tender. The key word here is were criticized. Now that would suggest that it being not spiritual or tender is not a criticism of the author. It is criticism of someone else, and the author is merely telling us that someone criticized Gabriel's song. Therefore, those two answer choices is different in one aspect. That is the attitude of the author towards Gabriel's song. In other words, the tone of the author towards Gabriel's song. In the first case, when the author says it was criticized for not being spiritual or tender, that is not author's direct opinion. Author is merely stating a fact. The fact being that someone criticized that Gabriel's song is not spiritual or tender. Therefore, the tone there is neutral from the point of view of the author. But in the second case, when the author says, according to the passage, Gabriel's songs were neither spiritual nor tender, that would suggest a direct criticism that the author has. Therefore, these two answer choices are different because the tone of those two answer choices are different. One being neutral, other being negative. What this tells us that tone plays a very crucial role in reading comprehension. Not just in question, they directly ask you the tone of the passage, but also other kind of questions. When we read a passage, we are largely interested in what? We focus too much on what is written in the passage. What is the author want to tell us? What is the subject? What's the topic? What about the topic the author is discussing? But what is also important to find out answer to these two questions. Why and how? Why? Why did the author write this passage? Did the author write this passage to criticize someone? Did the author write this passage to explain something? Why did the author write this passage? And how has he written it? What kind of words he has used? Has he used very strong words? Has he used neutral words? And these why and how is going to tell us the attitude that the author has or the tone of the passage, and also tell us the purpose that the author has. Understanding these things, which is tone and purpose, will go a long way in ensuring that you do well in reading comprehension. So let's understand the tone. Just to probably look at tone into three categories, saying that something is positive, something is neutral, something is negative. Negative would mean that either you're pretty angry or you're mocking someone. And you look at various positive tones. You can be thrilled, you can be excited, you're optimistic, and then you have this neutral tone in the middle, which is neither positive nor negative. Right. Now if you look at one particular aspect, which is this, almost all cat passages will have this neutral tone. You should have a better understanding of neutral tone. That's what we're going to do. Now this neutral tone can be looked at in two different categories. Now before explaining what are these two different categories of neutral tone, it's probably worthwhile to understand a pretty simple concept. That concept is a concept of whether something is a statement of opinion or statement of fact. Think about this particular sentence. Roses are red. Is that a statement of opinion or is it a statement of fact? You've rightly identified roses are red is a statement of fact. It's not an opinion. What about this statement? Roses are beautiful. Now roses are beautiful would be a statement of opinion. That's not a fact. What about this particular statement? Grass is blue. Now we know the grass is not blue, it's green. But if I have the statement grass is blue, is it a fact or is it an opinion? This, ladies and gentlemen, is a statement of fact. It is a false statement of fact, but it is a statement of fact. What is the statement of fact? Something that can be verified as true or false. That's a statement of fact. I can verify grass and say, you're telling grass is blue. No, that is false. Therefore, grass is blue is a statement of fact. It's a false statement of fact, but it is a statement of fact because we can verify it to say that whether it is true or false. Zetania is a great country. Now we don't have to bother whether Zetania exists or not, but the mere fact that something is great would make it a statement of opinion. We cannot verify for sure whether something is great or not. We can't even define what greatness means. So that's a statement of opinion. But if I say, President said that Zetania is a great country, that would be a statement of fact. Here, Zetania is a great country is not my opinion. It's President's opinion. I'm merely stating that President said something. Now we can go ahead and verify that. You can verify whether the President said that or not. Let's look at this particular passage. Now look at these words here. Paragraph number 1 talks about according to a new study. And the authors of that study wants us to think certain things. Second paragraph talks about according to research paper, these are the things that is mentioned. And towards the third paragraph says, a Facebook spokesperson said. If you look at the entire passage here, you will not find author's opinion anywhere. All these are statement of fact. And you will find the first kind of neutral tone in such a passage. Think about your textbook, for example. You will not find statement of opinion in your college textbook or school textbook. These are all statement of facts. Or if you look at a newspaper report, I'm not talking about the editorial, whether the editor expresses his opinion on an issue. I'm talking about the front page, for instance, where news is reported. In these kind of passages, you would say the purpose is to explain things to us, where the author presents statement of facts. Some may be true, some may be false, but nevertheless statement of facts. Not his opinion or not her opinion. We will call these kind of passages expository passages. The purpose is to explain, expository. Now what would be therefore the other kind of passage? The purpose is to do something else. There would be statement of opinion. Ladies and gentlemen, that is evaluative passage. The purpose is not to explain, but the purpose is to evaluate something. Let's make sense of this evaluative tone a little better. Let's address this question. Should you pursue a management education? Now you could look at three broad positions that you can take. You could say yes, you could say no, or you would say in some cases yes, in some cases no. So let's take a position no and write a very negative passage, the very negative paragraph on it. Now here the tone is based on emotion, not based on reason, not based on logic. Look at this particular paragraph. MBA applications always go up during a bad economy. That is because business school generally attracts people who are lost and more people who feel more lost when the bad job market is lousy. You can't take an entry level jobs after you take an MBA. So you had better know what you like to do. And you can't take a job in a low paying industry because you have to pay back the loan. So not only is an MBA useless for most jobs, but also makes you unqualified more jobs than it qualifies for. You see a lot of opinions, but there is something special about the opinion that the author is sharing here, using words like lost, lousy and useless. Now therefore you would see that this particular passage lacks something. What that lacks is logical reasoning. It lacks logical reasoning. The author has used emotion there, venting out his or her anger towards this particular subject. And this is a negative tone. It is not a neutral tone, it's a negative tone. It has opinion, but those opinions are very strong. Opinion is not backed by any logical reasoning. I can be neutral. I can still say no to this particular question and still be neutral. Let's look at this particular paragraph. An MBA education focuses on standard business skills like accounting, finance, operations and marketing. But it also focuses on key skills like critical thinking and analytical skills. This type of education can certainly give degree holders an edge for managerial positions. However, in a lot of industries, companies want to hire managers who have specialized knowledge and experience in their particular industry, not necessarily those who have general educations like the MBA curriculum. Make sure you understand what hiring managers in your field are looking for. In many industries, an MBA won't be useful to your career advancement. You see that the author has a negative evaluation to the particular question. Not entirely negative, but it does say there is a problem in MBA education. It may not be useful for your career advancement. But here, author does have this particular opinion. But here it is backed by certain reasons and logic. It uses logical reasoning, unlike the previous paragraph, where it does not use logical reasoning. Therefore, in this case, this becomes neutral and evaluative. The author's purpose is not to use his or her emotion to share his opinion. Author has taken a position, in this case, that MBA won't be useful to your career advancement, but uses logic and reason to justify that particular position, making this evaluative. So evaluative tone is a neutral tone. It's about evaluating a concept. Let's call it X. Now X could be banning alcohol, X could be pursuing education, X could be voting for a particular party, whatever. Look, you're evaluating X, which means you're looking at X and saying whether it is good or bad, or is right or wrong. Now you could take a position where you can do a positive evaluation, saying that X is good, but then giving reasons, a logical reason to back that position. That will make it neutral. You could make a negative evaluation. You can say X is bad, but then give reasons as to why it is bad. Or the third thing that you can do is kind of take a neutral evaluation. You can look at, some cases it is good, some cases it is bad, kind of asking the reader to decide what they want to do. So you could say in the third case, you are actually making analysis of X. While evaluating X, you are making analysis of X. In the first two cases, you're making an argument. X is good or X is bad, you're making an argument. So you could say the first two are argumentative as a tone, and the last one is analytical as a tone. All these comes under evaluation. Positive evaluation, negative evaluation, or neutral evaluation. So there you have it. The two kinds of neutral tone. One is expository, other is evaluative. Let's apply this concept to a couple of questions to understand how we can use tone to evaluate answer choices. Now this question says, the author alludes to the World Health Organization in order to do what? Now this is a specific purpose question. Let's look at the passage. The passage says, health has received less philosophical attention than disease. The conceptual terrain in the case of health is a little more complex than that of disease. One way of thinking about health says that it's just the absence of disease. So if disease is biological malfunction or abnormality, it follows that the healthy person is someone whose biological system are all in order. But another way of looking at health insists that it is not just the absence of disease, but the presence of something more, a positive state. The Constitution of the World Health Organization defines health a state of complete physical, mental and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. According to views like this, we should think in terms not of health and disease alone, but in terms of health, disease and normality. Look at the passage here. Author says the conceptual terrain of health is complex and talks about two ways of looking at health. One is health is absence of disease, another way is a positive state. So here author is explaining things to us. What is health? How can we define health? The author is not stating his opinion. Author does not say which is better. Author does not say whether definition number 1 is better or definition number 2 is better. Author merely tells us there are two kinds of definition. So the tone is expository. Now if we look at this question, asking about the specific purpose of World Health Organization, that comes there. The Constitution of World Health Organization defines health a state of complete physical, mental and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. Why? Before that, the author mentions that health is not just absence of disease, but the presence of something more, a positive state, and then talks about WHO. Therefore, WHO is used as an example for that definition of health. Answer choice B. Exemplify an alternative view of health as the presence of a positive state. Give an example of an alternative view of health. But let's look at this option from a different perspective in terms of tone. Option B, align to that tone. Exemplify an alternate view of health. So that is to explain. But if you look at option A, it talks about discredit the view that health is absence of disease. That's author's opinion. That's like one definition is better than another. Author has not had his opinion in this particular passage. Look at C. Justify the claim that health should not be neglected. Author is stating his opinion there. That is not what happened in the passage. And if you look at D, advance the notion that humans should improve their physical, mental and social well-being. Author does not share his opinion what human beings should or should not do with respect to their health. That's also the opinion. Therefore, the only option that is aligned to the tone of the passage is answer choice number B, and not A, not C and not D. Let's look at this example. Now this passage is much more dense and probably difficult to understand, but you will see that the options are very easy to eliminate using the idea of tone. It starts by saying a first evident logical weakness of the semantic interpretation of Nagarjuna's doctrine. The semantic interpretation of Nagarjuna's doctrine is what the author is evaluating. An author says it has got a logical weakness. The semantic interpretation of Nagarjuna's doctrine has got a problem. So here author is making an evaluation. That evaluation is a negative evaluation, but the author is telling us that something is wrong. And then the author goes on to justify his position by giving reasoning and logic. The tone is negative evaluation. So A, it has to be negative. B, it has to be evaluative. Let's evaluate each of the answer choice in this perspective. Let's look at B, for example. It says undertake to reconstruct the main features of the semantic interpretation of Nagarjuna's doctrine. Reconstruct is to build something. That's a positive evaluation. That's positive. You're trying to build something. Is it negative? No, it is not. Because it is not negative, this tone is not aligned to the tone of the passage. Therefore, this answer cannot be the right answer. Let's look at D, for example. Present an analysis of interpretation of Nagarjuna's doctrine of the two truths as summarized by the philosopher. Analysis means it is analytical, but in this case, there is an evaluation that the author has made which is negative. This option is not negative, which means this is not aligned to the tone of the passage. We eliminate B and D. Let's look at A and C. In both the cases, it says present the main incongruities in option A, or C says present the weaknesses. In both these cases, yes, there is negativity. Now we have to break down answer choice A and C and figure out which has a problem. First option says there is a problem in the Nagarjuna's theory itself, and the second says the problem is in the interpretation of Nagarjuna's theory. Now if you look at the passage, we see that the problem is with the semantic interpretation of Nagarjuna's doctrine. The problem is not with Nagarjuna's doctrine. The problem is the interpretation of the Nagarjuna's doctrine. That will make answer choice A incorrect, because answer choice A suggests that the problem is Nagarjuna's theory itself. Answer choice C correctly identifies the idea that the problem is with the interpretation of Nagarjuna's theory, making it answer choice C. Now you look at this particular question, even though the passage is very difficult, by understanding tone, you could easily eliminate the answer choice. So there you have it, using tone to understand the passage, using tone to evaluate options. More later. Please do subscribe and hit the notification button. And if you need any help in any topic, do let me know in the comment section below. This is Gejo signing off. Thank you.